And then this whole painting, looking at this whole painting, you would go, why? What's so great about that painting? It's not a good painting, but if you crop it and you find the good part of it and then make that into a quilt, it works.
All right. Okay, this is official. For nearly 30 years, Katie Pasquini Masopust has produced high-quality contemporary art quilts that have been coveted and collected by a broad range of admirers. From her early beginnings as a painter dabbling in traditional quilt making, her work has evolved from structured mandalas and mind-blowing dimensional pieces to very painterly landscapes and abstracts executed with the finest fabrics and the most creative stitching techniques. Katie says, I am a textile artist making quilts from many different inspirations. I am inspired from the nature around me and capture it through my camera lens. Lately, I have returned to my painting roots and I am creating quilts inspired from my paintings. I was an oil painter before becoming a quilter, and I relate the textures of oils applied with a palette knife to the textures I use in the fabrics I choose. The color and textures of the printed fabrics are what really excite me, and taking these seemingly incongruent patterns and colors and joining them together to create a beautiful image is what makes my heart soar. Today, Katie shares her art journey into the Quilters Hall of Fame and her passion for color and composition. She will also be discussing how you do not need to be a quilter to be a member of her mentorship group. And she will share how she uses fabric in her own paintings and how many painters have taken her classes and benefited from her knowledge of color and composition. Welcome, Katie. I am so glad to be here to share this hour with you and hear.
I'm happy to be here too. This is great.
So I'm going to spotlight you for everyone and let you take the scene or take the stage.
Take the stage. Okay. I put together a little PowerPoint presentation that I think would probably be best for me to start with that so that you can see where I'm kind of coming from. And then we can do questions and answers. And just as she said, this is going to be a very informal group. This is my first time doing it. So we will sort of learn together. So I'm going to share.
Enjoying the video? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when new Mastrius videos are added.
I'm going to share my screen to start with. And it takes me a little minute to get it to do what I want. I have discovered. So I'm just going to move some few things around so you're not, whoops, you're not seeing all my information that you don't need to see. So I'll hide the presenter view. So this should come in better. There we go. So she was saying that I started as a painter. I was an oil painter, applying my paint with a palette knife. I painted abstracts, as you just saw. I painted, this is George Harrison and Bob Dylan off the album cover, a concert for Bangladesh. So I would copy things and I didn't use a brush. I used a palette knife. So I started out as a painter from very young, as my mom encouraged me to paint since I was just a little kid. And so then through high school, and I don't have a formal college education. I'm self-taught, basically. I also did a lot of pen and inks, fine detailed things that I kind of relate to the details in my quilt making process. I slid this slide in because 1978 is when I officially became a quilt maker. I was caring for my mother who was ill, and I took a class to keep me entertained while we were in a foreign city. And 1978, so I started making quilts, learned how to piece and applique, and did a lot of traditional quilts, and then took a workshop with Michael James, who's my ultimate mentor. And he sort of asked me, you know, why are you taking the quilting class? You're an artist. Yes. You know how to make a traditional quilt. Yes. Then why aren't you using your art background to create one-of-a-kind quilt? So that was sort of my aha moment. And I like to help people get to that point, first of all, and then where to take it. So I started with this, I call it starting point, because it was the first piece I did that was just my own design rather than a traditional pattern. And it was all hand quilted. And then as I was hand quilting it, I was thinking, well, what if I blew this up twice as big? Because this is about 40 inches across, and pieced it and used colors. So that became this piece. And you can see it's the same design as the little one. No, Harry, don't bark. Design as the little one, but done with piecing and working with gradations of colors from light to dark in a red and blue color scheme. So that's sort of another thing I like to work with people on is working in a series, because I've always worked in a series. So these are called mandalas. They're based on a wedge rotating around a center. And I made quite a few of these until I've explored that as far as I felt I wanted to go. And then I come up with another series. So this one's called Lapis. And then again, the pieced version of the same thing. So the little one is all hand quilted. The big one is machine pieced and hand quilted. Then I did a series on 3-dimensional design using a vanishing point. And I really liked the idea of patchworking a ball. Now you can see my little hairy dog is trying to be part of this because I'm ignoring him. So little Harry, you get down and let me be doing this. So I did quite a few working with the ball, playing with colors. I like to use bright, bold colors. Here I have them sort of floating them in space. This was when Star Wars and Star Trek and all that was happening. So I am influenced by what's happening around me.
Katie, can you
Yes.
go a little slower?
Yes.
Can you leave the pictures up on the screen just a few seconds longer so we can really absorb them?
Sure. Okay. So the first was the mandala series, and then 3-dimensional design. And then I went into isometric perspective, which is based on baby blocks, which is one of the earliest, most traditional quilt patterns that there was. But then I started taking them and slicing them and putting holes in them and layering them. I love a lot of layers. So playing with that idea and set in corners, just isometric perspective is based on isometric graph paper. So you get the little diamonds that are all the same. So if there's no vanishing point, patterns remain the same through the piece. So this has 3 layers, a black layer in the background of the little iso blocks, then the baby blocks that have been cut up and put holes in them, the second layer, and then the first layer is bigger blocks with holes in them and sort of rods going through them. And so that there's 3 distinct layers. Warm colors come forward. I'll talk a lot about the power of color. Warm colors come forward, so they're in that front layer. White comes forward, black recedes, so that's how in the distance here, and the cool colors sort of float in the middle between the black and the white. So I like to play with that idea. I live in Northern California. The redwood trees are my favorite trees, and we used to go camping in them, under them. I have 7 brothers and sisters, and that was our big vacation, was an hour and a half down the road to camp in the redwoods. And it's a very special thing for me. So I haven't really done a redwood tree series, but during my different series, I will go back and reiterate the redwood tree in whatever the series is focused on. This is in the fractured landscapes, and most of my series have ended in a book about that design process. So this is working with a photograph, an image from reality, and drawing that, and then adding something to break it up so that there's light areas, medium areas, and dark areas. And I work a lot with value. Color gets all the credit, value does all the work. So I've talked about sorting fabric and how to organize your studio, or sorting paint, the same idea. My fabric is my palette. And so this was redwood trees in done fractured landscape. Okay, now it's not forwarding. Why isn't it forwarding? What's happening? Sorry.
That's okay.
Take a little commercial break here and figure out why this isn't going forward. There we go. I'll use these little buttons. That'll work. So this is another fractured landscape, a scene from Chaco Canyon. that I played with a square in the center and just kept getting the squares bigger and bigger, and using that to change values and colors between, just adding sort of a surreal feeling to the quilt.
Can you go back, Katie?
Yep.
I have a question.
Okay.
Those trees on the outside, are they fabric as well? Because they look like they're painted right on there.
No, the bigger parts of them are fabric, and then the little thin things are satin stitch with when I was doing the quilting to get the little branches.
Wow, that's magnificent. I just have
Thank
to
you.
say.
Thank you. This is Rio Hondo. This was chosen as one of the 100 quilts of the 20th century. It's a river that runs from the Taos ski basin in New Mexico down to the little town of Taos. And just plain was going to be a very monochromatic or just blue and white. So I ended up adding these lines of different colors to add sort of a fantasy quality to it. So that was the Fractured Landscape series. And then I wanted to change and do something different. So I moved to what I called ghost layers and color washes, where I would take a picture, do a drawing of it, like a little cartoon drawing of it, then pick some elements within the photograph maybe, and float those on the surface. That's the lower left drawing. And then because this was such a beige picture, and I like to work with color, I did a painting, yellow, blue, and red, and sort of layered all of that together to create this piece.
Oh my.
Which is Passages Pecos. This is a photograph from the Pecos National Monument Park in New Mexico. And so it's sort of like there's things that float in and out. You don't see the whole part of some things, and it just sort of, again, layers. I like to work a lot with layers. So here's another one in that same idea, different spot, Canyon du Chelly, where the Anasazi Indians lived and built these structures that have all these right angles, and it's just an amazing place. Anyway, a drawing of it, and then the ghost of that one was the Anasazi bricks, and then sort of it was doorways through the building, so I did doorways of color as well, and created this piece, which is Passages Chaco. And I technically I do applique. I call it machine applique. It's done. I turn all of my edges. I don't do raw edge, and I don't fuse. I'm not against any of that. This is just the choice I make to make my quilts. You can fuse, you can do raw edge, you can paint, you can do whatever you want. But I turn my edges and stitch them down with monofilament thread. So it's like invisible thread and with a little zigzag, and then quilt the pieces. Did someone have a question? I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say I love seeing your process,
Oh.
and then the resulting quilt from it is fantastic.
So still within the Ghost Layer series, I love glass carafes and set up this still life. Did a drawing, used the round bottle stopper to kind of be the transparency or the ghost to create this piece. So the kind of the idea with that was that, and is how could I make my objects look like they were glass, but just using fabric. So no reflective fabric or anything. It's all just fabric. So again, that is all related to value, the lightness or darkness of the fabric that you use. So this was another in the same sort of sub-series, but with these glass carafes, that I wanted to see if a checkerboard background would be fun to play with, but I didn't want to do orange and white. So I painted these cool colors and then created this piece, which was a lot of little squares sewing together. But I like the way the squares of the fabric distorted within the stoppers and the contours of the glass carafes. I wasn't, as I said earlier, I was a painter before, and I really like painting. And I have a class that I give in person on design explorations. We do a lot of different exercises, and one of them is painting, blind painting. So you put on a blindfold and you play music and you paint, just to the rhythm of the music. And then after that's all dry, you crop it. So there's a little rectangle that I cropped out that I really liked. And so that's that little tiny piece. It's only about 2 by 4 inches, but then I translate that into fabric. And so this was really exciting to sort of combine both my painting skills with my fabric making. So I did a lot of these. So this is just another painting. I like to work with red, yellow, and blue because when those colors cross, you get the other colors from mixing the paint and then translating that into fabric. Another big painting, or another small painting that gets translated into a large quilt. These quilts are about 80 inches across. They're huge.
Oh, wow.
So that's really fun. And like on this one, you can see I used white satin. If you look at the bottom, the white is a white satin, so that when you quilt on it, it really shows the texture of the quilting. So I'll discuss some of that, what kind of fabrics show the quilting better, or if you want the quilting not to show, what your intention is. So a lot of it's on intention and what your idea is for your work. So then I'm like, oh wow, I could do watercolor, I could do acrylic, you could do finger paints. What kind of painting could you do that you could crop? And I always crop. I generally crop. I don't feel that I paint the whole structure perfectly, but I know that if I just paint and give into my right brain, then there'll be a great little spot in there that'll make a quilt. So this is a watercolor that I cropped to this, which I thought was the best part of it, the little vertical but kind of diagonal placement of the blue lines against the yellow and the reds, and then make that into a quilt. So that could be, you could do the same thing with a photograph. I like to do paintings sometimes photographs, sometimes just sketches that I translate into fabric. This was a huge painting that was really ugly, and I cut it into 3-inch squares, threw out the really ugly squares, and put this together and liked the composition. So if the painting isn't quite right, you can cut it up and do things with it, and then made that into a quilt. So that the quilt was really successful. I don't think the painting was very successful, but it doesn't matter as long as something's successful. This is a plein air painting, outdoors painting with acrylic and a brush. This was a commission piece. And I kind of paint like a quilt, so it's like there's little blocks of color. And that was then translated into this 8-foot tall quilt piece that hangs in a resort in Colorado.
Wow.
Katie, I have a question.
Yes.
What is your background fabric? Or did you applicate all of these pieces together? Just curious.
They're all appliqued. I use Sulky Totally Stable as a background foundation.
Okay.
So I just put little pieces down and overlap and turn the edges that are on top, stitch them down, and then that stabilizer gets torn out.
Got it. Cool.
So then, so that was kind of, there was kind of series in there. And then I was asked to teach a class on log cabins and how could we make them more unique. So I took a photograph, put a grid, this one's a wonky grid, and then built a log cabin, which is a traditional quilting block, based on the colors within each grid. So I did a whole bunch of those. That's really fun class. Wrote a book about it. So here's another picture, a photograph that I take. I like to use my own photographs so I don't have to worry about getting anybody's permission or copyright or any of that. So take the photograph, put a grid on it. This one was just a regular square grid. I erased some of the lines, so there's some scale changes. I like to do contrast within my work. So big squares and little squares, and then made the log cabin block. So it's a real easy way to get composition with lines, just using lines, because the strips for the blocks are just lines basically. And it creates a very abstract piece, but from reality. So it's sort of a easy way to do something kind of arty from just a realistic photograph. Okay, this is a painting of mine. So I do paintings, and Lynn was talking about how I add fabric. So if you look at this and you see the straight darker lines, that's actually fabric that's cut out. And GAC, I use GAC 100 to attach it and paint. I paint first, Then I add the fabric and then I paint some over so the fabric isn't the last mark that you see. And so it sets it into the piece. And so I kind of like putting fabric in my paintings. And then this one, I like the painting, so I ended up making a log cabin based on the painting. And so once again, working with scale, there's larger blocks and smaller blocks, and just playing with the colors from the photograph. This is a poster from New York City on a wall. I was driving down the street and I asked my hostess to stop and let me out. It was just, she goes, "Why are you taking a picture of that? It's just a mess." But I just love the black and the white and the little bits of color. So I made that as a log cabin as well. And this was quilted just in a grid within the grids. This is a picture from David Walker took that I translated as such.
Your selection of fabric is magnificent, which is why we're all here. I know.
I have a lot of fabric. I have another in-person class that I call Watercolor to Quilt, where we do the watercolors, crop them, and then make them into quilts. So kind of playing with, you know, when watercolor crosses each other, you get these lovely transparencies, and the way the colors changes depending on what's on top and how wet your paint is and all of that. And to try and translate that into fabric by just not using a transparent fabric, but using colors that make it look like it has changed when it crosses another color. To me, I find that really exciting to, you know, you've got to have a big stash. You've got to be able to find the color value changes. This is another exercise from that class where you take cups and put paint on them and stamp them on the paper, and then use a little mister to get some, I like to play that contrast of hard and soft edges. So you get soft edges where the water hits the paint and makes it bleed. But if you crop it and you find the good part of it and then make that into a quilt, it works. So sometimes less is more. The whole painting, I think, would have been very, I don't know, almost disturbing to me. But to crop it and see only half of that big dark circle on the left and only a little smidge of the one on the lower right, so that there's the imagination can take you further out. But this focuses in on the most exciting part of actually a really bad painting. So then I took, I like to take classes outside my medium. So I was taking an acrylic painting class when I was really just doing quilts, and was stressed out about, because I like to crop, stressed out we were painting on a straight, you know, of a canvas stretched on boards, wood frame. And so I couldn't crop it. So my teacher said, "Why don't you just paint on canvas? Don't buy it already straight on the straight. And then you can cut up and then just make a frame for that." Well, I try when I take these classes to stay away from quilt making. But in this case, once I started cutting canvas, which is fabric, into smaller units, I started seeing the quilter's brain came out, and I started seeing how I could put these different squares and rectangles together. And so I was basically making a quilt out of my painted pieces, which was pretty exciting. And so I continued to do that. This was a white and a black, two different canvases were painted, done in neutral colors, and then cut up to create this composition. So that was really fun. So I kept doing that. I did this one using complementary colors of yellow and violet, and really liked this, but it was fairly small, probably about 24 inches by 30 inches. And so I thought, well, what if I made a quilt? Because I made quilts of the watercolor paintings. What if I made a quilt of that, then took the painting and put that in the quilt? So you could see the painting on the left and the painting in the quilt on the right. It's the same piece. And the quilt is made out of fabric, following all the brush marks within the painting. And then the whole thing is quilted. So that started a whole new series. So here's a painting. I painted 3 canvases, a very dark one, a gray one, and a white one, cut them up to make this composition, then did a drawing of that, blew it up 2 or 3 times bigger, and made that out of fabric. and applied the painting part, the circle part of the painting into the quilt. So it's mixed media. There's a painting and there's a quilt. So this is about the size I do the paintings. It's about 22 by 28 inches, the size of a foam core board, a medium-sized foam core board. So I pick a color scheme. I painted 3 paintings. And then I was going to cut them up, but I just couldn't come up with an inspiration for cutting them up because I think I really liked this painting as a painting, the whole thing. I didn't have to crop it. I really liked it. So I thought, well, what if I took the orange painting or yellow painting and put it in the larger yellow orange squares and the black painting into the black and created this quilt. So the only painting in this is the little bits of the yellow and the black. The white painting wasn't used in it, but it is the piece. Is this making sense?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
My brain is on fire.
Okay, so here's some just paintings. They never became quilts. They were just fun paintings. This is probably about 40 inches by 20 inches. You can see the black lines. Those are the fabric. So just sort of, again, put down the kind of work out the marks and where I want the colors, put down strokes, put down the fabric, and then put strokes over so the fabric sets in. It's the middle layer, not the last layer. And if I put the fabric in too soon, I paint over it and you don't see it. So it's kind of tricky where you end up putting the fabric. So these are all kind of from that grouping of explorations. This is another painting. I usually, when I'm working on a series, I have a strong idea of what I want to do, on each one sort of begats the next one. But every once in a while I get to the end and I'm like, what am I going to do now? And so I sort of wander around, take photographs, go on a little journey. Sometimes the journey takes me, to a beautiful landscape somewhere. And sometimes it takes me to my closet where all my old paintings are. And I found this old painting that I thought, well, that one's pretty good. Let's make that into a quilt. So taking the idea from the painting, which was very loose, a lot of water, a lot of spraying the water on the acrylic paint. So it was very drippy, which is really hard to do. Really, really soft edge with fabric. So to try and get that feeling of soft edge by having very close values of the same color next to each other as they go out from, the hard edge of the circle and stuff. So I find that really fun to try and copy a painting. I've had people say, why do that? You made the painting. But it's like, for me, I'm a quilt maker. So to make a quilt that looks like a painting, I think's very fun. I did another series, still working with the acrylic paint. So within series, I do sort of sub-series. So this one was going to be graffiti. So I did 2 paintings, a white painting and a red painting, and I cut it up. And then when it was all sewn back together, I took black paint and a big round brush, drippy and very stressful moment to go up to something I really liked and put graffiti on it. And then you can see that I do a line drawing of the painting, and then that's its drawing enlarged, and those become the templates for the fabric to make that into a quilt. So the painting is in there. You can see the sort of grayish black. That's the shine of the paint from the photograph. So that's the painting. It's set in there, like about there. And then ultra suede, black ultra suede is used once I get the quilt made, the painting put in it, then I'll put the black graffiti over both of those and then quilt the whole thing. So that was kind of a fun series. I did 5 or 6 of them. I'm going to show you a couple. Here's another one. It was a blue and white. You can see the painting is applied in there. This time I turned the painting upside down. And so the blue of the quilt is at the top and the blue of the painting is at the bottom. So that kind of gave a different kind of look to it. And then I did quite a few more of them, but I just showed you those 2. This is from the watercolor quilt class using rubber cement. So it's just anything that you can play with in painting. And I wonder, could you do it with pottery? What about if you're a potter and you fire your pottery and how that comes out? Could you make a quilt of what that fired glaze looks like? Could it be jewelry? What could it be that would inspire me? That's why I like to take different kinds of classes that would inspire my quilts and still have fun learning to do other things. But this is just using rubber cement, dripping it on the paper, letting that dry, then painting. I picked a complementary color scheme, painting that, letting that dry, and then you rub off the rubber cement to get these really clear white lines. And then I blew that up and made it into a quilt. So that was a really fun one. I love this quilt. I do a lot of painting and cutting them up to make things. So I did a still life series. This is just different paintings. I don't throw any painting away. I have drawers, I have drawers sorted for my fabric colors. I have drawers sorted for my painting colors. So I have red drawers and white drawers, and I cut them up and make these still lifes. This was a little crazy thing I went through that was really fun. Just making a ground and a back wall, kind of a funky table, put a vase on it, put some really weird flowers on it. The first one I tried to make the flowers look real, and I decided, no, this has to be very abstract. So triangles for flowers and squares and just different kinds of shapes, and playing with it. Then I stitched those fabric pieces, butt them up together, stitch them with a zigzag, and then put batting and backing, another piece of canvas for the backing, and then machine quilt it. So I'm adding this little line drawing over the whole thing with black thread that I just love. I'm just copying the brush marks and bringing them forward. And so then I thought, well, this is really fun. So I made what I thought was a really nice painting, and then made that into a quilt. So it was fine for a while just doing the still life paintings, but then one day I just clicked and said, what if I made a quilt of that painting? So here again is a little still life made just out of the canvases, and then translated into just fabric. So sometimes the painting goes into the quilt, and sometimes it's just the inspiration for the quilt. So here's the painting on the right. Here's the line drawing that I take into FedEx office and have it blown up to the size I want to make the quilt. And then each of those little pieces is a piece of fabric to make the quilt. So that was a fun series. Did quite a few of them. This is how I used to store my fabric. All very organized. Yellows are in the yellow box, reds are in the red box. This is how it was a couple years ago, and my cousin's daughter is a Marie Kondo organizer. If you are familiar with Marie Kondo and everything has a place and is folded neatly and perfectly, she came over. Her mom was going to make her a baby quilt for her girlfriend, and she could not stand the way I had my fabric stored. She just flipped out. So she came back for a week, and we organized it. We had an article in AQS magazine. She's been focused on Marie Kondo's site with this little picture of before and after.
Oh my goodness.
So that's how my fabric is. It's not quite as neat as that. That was really, really neat. And it's been 4 years now, but I still have it folded pretty darn close to this, just because it makes it so easy for me to access, see what I have, and use it. So this is my palette.
Oh, I have goosebumps.
During COVID, being home alone, that was really not so bad for me to be stuck in my studio for 2 years. So I got a lot of work done, a lot of series. This is one piece that was used in Sandra Sider's pandemic quilts, because she thought it looked like the COVID thing. That's not what I was thinking of when I was making it, but COVID was all about that big circle, right? So anyway, this is the quilt that was made from the lower one. The lower one on the left is the painting, and the upper one on the left is leftover pieces. So I just keep cutting up and making kind of constructions, but the lower one became the quilt.
Mm-hmm.
Now my latest series, so we're almost ready to, how am I doing on time? I think I'm okay.
You're doing great. You still have about 15, 17 minutes.
Okay, so this is a painting during COVID. I didn't want to go anywhere. And this is a painting I made 15, 20 years ago, was hanging at the top of my stairway, which is how I get to my studio. And I kept looking at it and I love this painting. There's fabric in it, there's stamps in it. And I thought, I want to make that into a quilt because I got no other ideas. So I took I took a photograph of it because it was a large painting. It's about 55 by 60 inches. So I took a photograph of it and printed that out so I could do the drawing because I didn't want to do a drawing that big. And then you can see the painting and you can see the drawing enlarged to the same size as the painting. And it was very scary. And so I thought, anybody can do anything in 5 inches. So I put a grid on it and was going to construct it because, you know, each day of being stuck in the studio of the lockdown, each day I could do a block. It ended up being, I did about 5 blocks a day and then put a little strip, a little bit of like a sashing, but I called it grout in between because I was going to just sew them all together, but then you lost that beautiful grid or it diffused. So that, that was so much fun. So then I did another painting intentionally to do this with, like circles, put lots of fabric in it. There's checkerboard fabrics. I like to mix that fabric in there and then made that into a quilt. So that was quite a series. This was a really fun color combination, just using the teals with the grayscale and then the piece and changing that little bit of grout from white in some areas to black and sort of playing with that layer and layers, a lot of layers in the painting, but then there's another layer of that grid that sometimes seems to be in front of the painting or the quilt and sometimes slides back. And then I have a show right now at the Nebraska Museum in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I did this piece for it. This is actually 4 paintings, a light one, a magenta one, a teal one, and kind of this mustardy yellow one. Cut them up into circles, just not because of COVID, but because I like circles. And then made that into this quilt. And so you can see again here, there's black and white checkerboards, there's black and white dotted fabric. So I like to add black and white with the colors. And so that's a painting on the left and a quilt on the right. Oh yeah, I cut the painting up into a circle and placed it kind of lower right. So that's an actual painting there. Do you see the little arrow?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
All right. And then the last 2 I'm going to show you. This was one I did quite a while ago that was going to be at the museum already in another show. So I thought, okay, I did that as a painting. I like it. I called it Spring Equinox. This is called Spring Equinox. And this is the quilt, rather large quilt, probably about 80 inches. And so I wanted to have a partner piece. I wanted to have winter solstice, spring equinox, winter solstice. So this was all springy colors. And so I did a painting kind of playing with the cool winter colors and the aspen trees and a wild sun in the back and made this quilt. So the 2 of these hanging together look pretty cool. And I think that's it. Yep, that's it. So I'm going to stop my share and be back with you guys.
And this would be a good time to ask if anybody has any questions or any comments or anything they want to say.
How do you have the patience to applicate all those little tiny pieces?
Well, I'm not a very patient person, and you can ask my cousin and my boyfriend, and they'll say, no, she's the most impatient person there is. But I love doing this. It doesn't take any patience. It's just sort of, and it's done. I spray the fabric. I put the template on it. I use a hot iron to turn the fabric over the template, and then it's stitched down by machine. So it's not hand applique.
Okay,
It's different.
that's better.
It's better.
I have a question.
Yes.
How do you see this going forward, what we're doing here?
Oh, for for this particular mentorship group.
Yes.
I don't know. I've never done this before. I figured that we'll get together the first meeting, and what I want you to do before then is to think about where you want to go. Do you want to work in a series? Do you want to try a couple of different things? You know, if a series, then we start a little bit differently. Everybody can do something different and learn from each other as well. So it's kind of, what do you want to do? And I would like it if it was something that you wanted to do that gets you out of the box, because I want to feel like I'm there to help you explore different things. And so just kind of figure out where you want to go. Do you want to try painting and canvas and fabric? Do you want to do applique? Do you want to do piecing? I pretty much know, pretty much as far as quilt making goes, technically how to help you do anything, but also I want to help you think about composition, color schemes, visual pathways, things that painters think about when they're doing their paintings. Quilting takes a lot longer, I feel, to get finished in general. I'll probably get myself in trouble with that statement, but to have it a well thought out. I'm not an intuitive quilt maker where I just start with a piece of fabric and get going. I like to have a plan. I like to know what was my intention. What do I want to say with this? And it doesn't have to be, I want to say something about world peace or anything. It just, I want to do something beautiful. I want to do something about the winter, or, you know, whatever, but to have a voice and have intention, and go about it with, okay, what will make this the best, the strongest? How can I work out a lot of the problems before I even touch the fabric?
Can I just read this little piece that came off of your Mastrius site about
Sure.
your mentorship? Because I think it says it very clearly in your words. Some of what Katie will focus on during her mentorship is color theory and the importance of visual texture. She will be discussing the overall visual impression of the work and the way the eye travels around the piece, focal points, and the power of color through personal critiques of your work. Does that
Yep.
sound about right?
Of the students' work.
Of the students' work, of the critiques of the students' work. And also you were going to talk about how you don't have to be a quilter, because I am not a quilter.
Right.
I am a mixed media artist, and I can already see how much value I'm going to be getting out of this mentorship, but I'll let you speak to that.
Yes, I have done online, not Zoom based, but email based classes, and I've had some painters take the class, and you know, I can give out, and I can still critique them. It's the same thing. It's still color. It's still value. It's still visual texture. You know, a painting has texture as well by the brush strokes, and so a painter could benefit just as much. I do paint, so I do painting. I might talk a painter and to put a little fabric in their painting. I might talk a quilter to put a little paint in her quilt. You know, I mean, there's no reason that these can't cross.
Right. And with Mastrius, what's different between a mentorship and a class is that, like Katie was saying, think about what it is that you want to get from this mentorship, what your focus is. We meet once a month for 2 hours with Katie, where part of the session, she does some kind of learning, whether it's a demo or whatever. But part of the session is she's given us homework or exercises or something to work on, or maybe we bring a finished piece and she critiques it. And we learn from that as well, from our own and from listening to others getting theirs critiqued. And then we also meet once a month for 1 hour, just the group, not Katie, for a mid-month meeting where we talk about everything, our sessions, the homework, how things are going, if we want to tweak the sessions to go in a slightly different direction, and just whatever's going on in our art lives and our regular lives. And it's a really wonderful way to connect with other fabric artists like you, and getting to know each other. It is a fantastic process, and you get so much more out of it than you would out of a course.
Yeah, because what I'm thinking of is I have a set course for not a mentorship program, but if we're working in, like I was talking about, contrast and layers and hard and soft edge. So if one of you decides you're going to work, let's say, a series on trees, and someone wants to work on geometric shapes, piecing or line like the log cabins or whatever, and you guys are interested in hard and soft edges, then I can talk to you about how you would get hard and soft edges with a tree, how you could get hard and soft edges with your geometric shapes or with your log cabin, or, you know, that kind of thing. Because I have some things that I really think are important, like contrast, you know, tight things, loose things, small lines, fat lines, all of that can be interpreted in anything that you want to do. And then if you're just like, I don't know what I want to do, I can give you an actual lesson, you know, use these colors, play with this type of, you know, dominant shape or support, you know, I can give that kind of parameter to you that you can then interpret in any way you want. That's sort of reaching back to the classes I already teach. But also, if something comes up and, oh, we really want to learn about that, or something happened in the world that we saw some great artist is being recognized for something, let's figure out how they did it, and how could we interpret that, you know, use that as inspiration.
That sounds fabulous.
So it's really loose.
I'm going to put a link in the chat to Katie's mentorship, Mastrius mentorship page for anybody that's interested in it. I know a lot of you here are already signed up to our group. I have to tell you, there is only one spot left for the session that's going to start January 6th and runs the first Saturday of every month from 11 to 1 Mountain Standard Time. If you are interested in working with Katie, you have one chair left for this mentorship group for right now. Now, does anyone, first of all, did that answer your question?
Yes, answered mine.
Okay, great. And does anyone else have anything they would like to ask? And this is a safe place to do it.
Yeah. And so, Lynn, will they be sending me ideas, or are we just waiting till the first meeting?
Oh, no. Well, each of the members has been asked to complete a form
Okay.
that talks about their path, what they're looking for, and rates different, you know, and they put what's important in a survey. You have access to all those forms. If anyone hasn't filled out their form yet, please do so as soon as possible. Sherry, was that you saying? Yeah, so as soon as you can. And then what I like to do is you give me a few questions of things you would like to know about what each person wants. Like, why did they pick you for a mentor? What are they looking for out of the group? That kind of thing. And I'll put the questions in our page, and everybody can think about them and have answers for them for our first session.
Okay. And
Is
you'll
that-
tell me how to access this stuff. I'm so new, you guys, that she has to walk me through how I find where you've turned this stuff in, because I haven't seen that yet, and I want to do
Yes, I will absolutely do that. And I will meet with everyone who can make it at a meet and greet on Sunday, this Sunday at 11 a.m. Sorry, I have to check my calendar and make sure I get the right time. At 11 a.m. Mountain Time. And there will be a link in our feed to the Zoom room. And if you can join us, then we can all talk about everything. And I can show you around the chat room too, and how things work.
I think this is a great group. I think I'm really excited. I'm glad we did this, because I was like, oh no, what are we gonna do? But I think it's gonna be great.
Then I have one more question.
Yes,
You today sent us an email with the Zoom link.
yes,
Will
I did.
you do that, or you'll just continue to do that?
Yes, I put the link in our feed, but you actually get an email notifying you that I've just done that. And so you have it in your email and you have it in our feed. And
Okay, could you explain the feed?
I will do that on Sunday.
Great.
I will share the screen and I will show all of you the Mastrius chat platform.
I think once we get it, it's going to be really easy. But until we actually walk through it, you're like, what? How do
Yes.
we find that?
Yes. So if you can come on Sunday, that would be lovely. And if you can't come on Sunday, reach out to me and I will set up a personal one-on-one meeting with you. And
Oh,
we
that's
will
awesome.
go on Zoom together and I will show you how everything works. Because I was new once too, and this stuff scared the bejesus out of me.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know.
Okay, if there's no other questions from anyone, Laurel, you've been very quiet but listening intensely.
Well, I did ask one question.
Oh,
Yes, you did.
But if no one else has any other questions, I think we are ready to wrap up this wonderful Meet the Mentor session. Thank you all for joining us. It has been a fabulous hour. And like I said, my brain is on fire already. I can't wait for January 6th.
Okay, good deal. I'm very excited. Thank you, you guys. It's going to be a great group.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, Katie.
Bye. Merry Christmas. Have a good
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.
Merry
Yes.
Christmas.
Merry
Bye.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.